I'm conscious of the clock, but equally I'm conscious that you've heard three very different and stimulating speeches. So if anyone has any questions or any issues they'd like to raise, please feel free to do so now. Philip.
To Mr. Duffy, please. Do you hear me? I haven't heard anything about the situation in Victoria, I think about jump races in Australia. There is a difficult situation, I was told by opponents. Can you make comment on this?
Sorry, jump racing, yeah.
Jump racing in Victoria was confirmed again last year, and this year's season was probably the best for many, many years. That arose as a result of some fairly stringent safeguards and programs that were introduced by Racing Victoria, particularly a lot more trialling of horses before they were allowed to run in jumps races, and also a lot more veterinary inspections of horses, and changing the courses on which races were run. That is, the only metropolitan track which has any now is Sandown. There's none at Flemington or Caulfield or Moonee Valley. And there is a tendency now to have a lot of jumps racing in the Western District of Victoria, centred around Warrnambool, where there is strong support for jumping. And that's where it is at the moment. And I think that my view would be that it's probably in a stronger position than it's been for a long, long while, actually.
Okay. I have a question, maybe for all the speakers. I suppose, listening, Michael, you raised the issue of getting the message across to government, and I felt Francesco's speech illustrated the difficulty when you can't get a message across to government. And I know, talking to David Wilmot in Canada, they're experiencing a difficulty with their slot machine legislation. Maybe addressed to Bertrand and Michael, who are two what I would call success stories. What can racing do better to get the message across in terms of the value of the industry to the economy, to government? We've all been there, we've all dealt with politicians. Eyes can glaze over when you talk about the things that get us excited. What can we do better? Maybe Bertrand?
I think there are several arguments which must be used. First is certainly the economic importance of racing in terms of activity for breeding and the sales, and furthermore, when the horses are interesting for the economy as their capacity to be exported. There is also another thing when you consider that local governments are more and more interested in the description of the landslide, and then you can see that with race courses you have some green spaces, and in many areas they are almost in the middle of town. So this is also something which must be emphasized towards local authorities. And also the specificity of horse racing, where you can find together the biggest breeder or owner representing extremely important financial resources, but also very small owners being able to have very good horse races. We have known this year in France that our Prix du Jockey Club was won by a baker who in fact had just one horse in training. He bought 10,000 euros. He won the Prix du Jockey Club and won one of the favorites of the Arc. So it's all that which must be constantly and repeatedly explained to all the governmental authorities.
Michael, I mean, sometimes the problem we find in Europe is it's perceived as the sport of kings. I don't get the sense that you have the same issues in Australia. What?
I think a bit. You see, I think one of the problems is that within any government, It's a strange thing, but you find that there aren't that many people who are interested in racing. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I mean, just to give you an indication in a very short way, I saw a situation once where a Prime Minister was supporting some taxation reform which would have benefited the industry enormously. And he got it up, but he got it up only by putting people's hands up their back almost and saying, you know, you better do this. Because the argument ran, why are you giving that money to wealthy breeders when the education minister's saying, I wouldn't mind some of that, or the health minister's saying, it's a competitive thing, I think, Brian. And the economic aspects of it, if you take in Victoria in the last 8 years, both of the ministers have been able to, they spell out every time they come to a function and make a speech, they spell out the economic benefits. But I don't think that makes it any easier for that minister to get the money once they get back into the cabinet room. So, I mean, it's not a very sensible suggestion, but I really think all you've got to do is just keep working at it and get as many of them as you can to go to the races and see if they show a bit of interest. But it's a tough grind, that. It's the one thing that I wouldn't like to be trying to do for a living, I can tell you, is lobbying on behalf of the industry. It's a tough one.
Okay. Bertrand, maybe one thing struck me. Are you confident the present enviable position in France with betting and the relationship the racing has with betting can be maintained? And I suppose a linked question, how will changes in technology affect that, and what is France Gallo doing about it? I mean, we see huge developments in the whole area of betting.
In terms of betting, so far so good. We have been able to maintain an important level of growth over the past years, and despite of the difficulties which we have to face in France, this year apparently betting on horse racing is again positive. Not much, but slightly positive, which is an achievement. Certainly, betting has to not only accompany, but preferably to be innovative in terms of what is going to happen. In this country, we started internet betting in 2003, but now there are many more opportunities due to modern technologies, such as, for instance, betting through telephones and all the new systems which are taking place. And this must be pursued. There's no doubt that right now we can see that betting is more and more progressing with or through new technologies, such as internet, for instance. And so we have to take that into consideration and adapt products to the internet world.
Okay. Louis?
One question for you, Brian. In your introduction, you mentioned how Ireland was adapting to changing environment and that the government was going to legislate again, probably very soon, on some changes. How can you still resist the pressure not to merge the Irish Turf Club and Horse Racing Authority in one body?
That would be a very negative move for the IFHA, Louis. Instead of getting 2 subscriptions, you'd only get 1 subscription. No, I mean, we firmly believe that there's a need to have a separation between the regulation of the sport and the financial and commercial aspects of the sport. And that structure has worked well and served racing well down through the years. I think the legislation will look for efficiencies in that relationship. But I've worked on both sides of that fence, and I think the current structure works well in Ireland. Some may call it an Irish solution to an Irish problem, but it works well. I think the real area of interest for us in the legislation is that the government, having spoken about it for some time, are now advancing the introduction of what they call a point of consumption tax on betting. So they will now tax betting on the basis of where the punter is based or where the punter is resident. So any operator that's targeting the Irish market would be required to obtain a licence from the Irish government and declare bets and pay tax on that basis. Irish Racing has historically had a relationship where betting tax is ring-fenced to fund and develop the racing and greyhound racing industries indeed, and we're pursuing government vigorously to address that. The quid pro quo, obviously, for government restructuring racing is they want to see maximum efficiency. So I don't think you won't see Dennis and myself merging into one being for the foreseeable future. Any more questions? Yeah, sorry.
Yes, Werner Nabeel from Belgium. I gather from Mr. Rufo's explanation that one of the main competition came from slot machines. I wonder if this is specific to Italy, or if in other countries you also begin to feel competition from that type of gaming. And incidentally, if we could hear who runs the slot machines in Italy, it'll be interesting. Thank you.
Le slot machine, ils sont gérés, sono gestite.
The slot machines are managed by the same people that manage the Paris Hippique, the horse betting, that is. It's managed by the same agency, so therefore they are authorized to sell all sorts of betting projects, sports betting, slot machines, video lotteries, etc.
Su 80 miliardi di gioco, slot machine e video lottery arrivano a circa il 70%. Le scommesse sportive un 6%, quasi tutte football, di calcio.
Actually, slot machines are managed by the same people who manage horse racing betting activities. In the same shops, they're allowed to sell all kinds of products. Horse racing, all kinds of betting on sports, slot machines, video lottery, and the new instantaneous lotteries. On a total of 80 billion of gaming revenues, slot machines and video lottery account for 70%, 70. Sports betting, 6%, and that is mostly soccer.
Maybe I'll ask two people also to comment on slot machines. Bertrand and maybe David, I regard you as the world expert on slot machines, so maybe we'll get a view from Canada, but maybe Bertrand first.
In France, we've had a lot of slot machines, all in fact managed by casinos. And this has explained the very strong increase of the business made by casinos some 10 years ago. Since now, I would say 3 years, the business made through slot machines has been reducing, although casinos have tried to increase their number. But certainly it is less important than it was a few years ago. There are some more challenging competitors, such as poker, for instance, which has been very strong for the past years in France, and also slightly reducing probably this year.
In Victoria, for many years, there were two owners of the machines, but now they're venue-based. If you own a hotel, you were able to buy the machine. So it's now a little bit different. As in France, the biggest recipient of funds from machines in Victoria would certainly be the casino, a very large casino in Melbourne. But some of the race clubs have now bought hotels where there are machines which they then have to buy. But the experience is a bit similar. The anti-gambling regime in Melbourne particularly, or in Victoria, I don't know the other states, I think it's probably the same, they're becoming a lot more vocal. I'm not as confident that the revenue stream from poker machines will be as high as some people anticipated. It's starting to stabilise and it might start to come down, I think. But it's now owned by the people that own the establishment, rather than in the past where you had an operator who rented them out.